It's just before 10 p.m. on the East Coast. Welcome back to Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland, Ohio, and the very first Republican primary debate of the 2016 presidential campaign. 10 candidates on the stage, selected based on their standing in 5 national polls. And tonight they are facing off, answering the questions you want asked, we hope.
Gentlemen, we're obviously digging into some subjects in depth, but we're also going to change it up every once in a while throughout the next hour and have mini rounds where we ask, you're not going to like it, only a couple of candidates' questions on those subjects. This is the first of the mini rounds, and it's about somebody whose name probably hasn't been mentioned enough so far tonight. Governor Kasich, let me start with you. Whoever the Republican nominee is, it looks, at least for now, like whoever that nominee is, he or she, will be facing off against Hillary Clinton. You know how she will come after whoever the Republican nominee is. She will say that you, whoever it is, support the rich while she supports the middle class, that you want to suppress the rights of women and minorities. She wants to move the country forward while you, the Republicans, want to take the country back to the past. How will you, if you're the nominee, how will you answer that and take Hillary Clinton on?
Well, let's start off with my father being a mailman, so I understand the concerns of all the folks across this country, some of whom have trouble, making ends meet. But I think she will come in a narrow way. The nominee of this party, if they're going to win, has got to come at it in a big way, which is pro-growth, which is balancing budgets. You know, we were talking about it. People were saying, could we do it? I was the chairman of the Budget Committee and the lead architect the last time it happened in Washington. And when we did it, we had great economic growth, we cut taxes, and we had a big surplus. Economic growth is the key. Economic growth is the key to everything. But once you have economic growth, it is important that we reach out to people who live in the shadows, the people who don't seem to ever think they get a fair deal. And that includes people in our minority community. That includes people who feel as though they don't have a chance to move up. You know, America is a miracle country, and we have to restore the sense that the miracle will apply to you. Each and every one of the people in this country who's watching tonight, lift everybody, unite everybody, and build a stronger United States of America again. It will be and can be done.
I know that all of you would like to answer this question, but we're only going to ask one other candidate before we move on to a different subject. Dr. Carson, basically same question to you. If Hillary Clinton is the nominee and she comes at you with that kind of line of attack, how will you take her on?
If Hillary is the candidate, which I doubt, that would be a dream come true. But, the fact of the matter is, she is the epitome of the secular progressive movement. And she counts on the fact that people are uninformed, the Alinsky model, taking advantage of useful idiots. Well, I just happen to believe that people are not stupid. And the way I will come at it is to educate people, help people to actually understand that is that progressive movement that is causing them the problems. You know, you look at the national debt and how it's being driven up. If I was trying to destroy this country, what I would do is find a way to drive wedges between all the people, drive the debt to an unsustainable level, and then step off the stage as a world leader and let our enemies increase while we decreased our capacity as a military person, and that's what she's doing.
Gentlemen, we're going to turn now to the subject of the economy, jobs, and money, and the government. And Governor Bush, I'm going to start with you. You have made a bold promise in your announcement. You have promised 4% economic growth and 19 million new jobs if you were fortunate enough to serve 2 terms as president. That many jobs, 19 million, would be triple what your father and your brother accomplished together. And 4% growth, the last president to average that was Lyndon Johnson during the height of the Vietnam War. So, question, how on earth, specifically, would you pull that off?
We've done it 27 times since World War II. I think we need to lift our spirits and have high, lofty expectations for this great country of ours. The new normal of 2% that the left is saying you can't do anything about is so dangerous for our country. There's 6 million people living in poverty today, more than when Barack Obama got elected. 6.5 million people are working part-time, most of whom want to work full-time. We've created rules and taxes on top of every aspiration of people, and the net result is we're not growing fast, income's not growing. A 4% growth strategy means you fix a convoluted tax code. You get in and you change every aspect of regulations that are job killers. You get rid of Obamacare and replace it with something that doesn't suppress wages and kill jobs. You embrace the energy revolution in our country. This president and Hillary Clinton, who can't even say she's for the XL pipeline even after she's left, give me a break. Of course we're for it. We should be for these things to create high sustained economic growth. And frankly, fixing our immigration system and turning it into an economic driver is part of this as well. We can do this.
Governor Walker, when you ran for governor of Wisconsin back in 2010, you promised that you would create 250,000 jobs in your first term, first 4 years. In fact, Wisconsin added barely half that and ranked 35th in the country in job growth. Now you're running for president and you're promising an economic plan in which everyone will earn a piece of the American dream. Given your record in Wisconsin, why should voters believe you?
Well, the voters in Wisconsin elected me last year for the third time because they wanted someone who aimed high, not aimed low. Before I came in, the unemployment rate was over 8%. It's now down to 4.6%. We've more than made up for the jobs that were lost during the recession, and the rate in which people are working is almost 5 points higher than it is nationally. You know, people like Hillary Clinton think you grow the economy by growing Washington. One report last year showed that 6 of the top 10 wealthiest counties in America were in or around Washington, D.C. I think most of us in America understand that people, not the government, creates jobs. And one of the best things we can do is get the government out of the way, repeal Obamacare, rein in all the out-of-control regulations, put in place an all-the-above energy policy, get people the education and skills that they need to succeed, and lower the tax rate and reform the tax code. That's what I'll do as president, just like I did in Wisconsin.
Governor Christie, I want to engage you and Governor Huckabee in a subject that is a big issue in both of your campaigns, and that is entitlement reform. You say that to save the system, you want to raise the retirement age, have to raise the retirement age, and to cut benefits for Social Security and Medicare, and you say that some of the candidates here on the stage are lying. Governor Huckabee says he can save Social Security and Medicare without doing any of that. Is he lying?
No, he's not lying. He's just wrong. I mean, so there's a difference. Listen, I'm the only guy on the stage who's put out a detailed 12-point plan on entitlement reform, and here's why. Because 71% of federal spending right now is on entitlements and debt service. 71%. And we have spent the last hour and 5 minutes talking about the other 29%, and no time on the 71%. And that makes no sense. Now, let me tell you exactly what we would do on Social Security. Yes, we'd raise the retirement age 2 years and phase it in over 25 years. That means we'd raise it 1 month a year for 25 years when we're all living longer and living better lives. Secondly, we would means test Social Security for those who are making over $200,000 a year in retirement income and who have $4 to $5 million in liquid assets saved. They don't need that Social Security check. Social Security is meant to be to make sure that no one who's worked hard and played by the rules and paid into the system grows old in poverty in America. If we don't deal with this problem, it will bankrupt our country or lead to massive tax increases, neither one that we want in this country.
Governor Huckabee, you say that changing entitlements, the kind of thing that Governor Christie is talking about, would be breaking a promise to the American people. And you say that you can keep those programs, save Social Security, save Medicare without those kinds of reforms through a fair tax, which is a broad tax on consumption. Please explain to Governor Christie how that would work and how you could save these programs without the kind of painful reforms he says we need.
Let's all be reminded 60 million Americans are on Social Security. 60 million. A third of those people depend on 90% of their income from Social Security. Nobody in this country is on Social Security because they made the decision when they were starting work at 14 that they wanted to entrust some of their money with the government. The government took it out of their check whether they wanted them to or not. And if a person goes to 65, they're going to spend 51 years with the government reaching into their pocket at every paycheck. Now, here's the point. Whose fault is it that the system is screwed up? Is it the recipients or is it the government? And if Congress wants to mess with the retirement program, why don't we let them start by changing their retirement program and not have one, instead of talking about getting rid of Social Security and Medicare that was robbed $700 billion to pay for Obamacare? It's always that the government figures that they can do this off the backs of people, many of whom are poor and depend on that money, and I just think it's fundamentally lying to the people and stealing from them, and we shouldn't be doing it.
Chris.
30 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with ending Congress's retirement program. I'm a governor. I don't have a retirement program in my state, and I don't disagree with that. But here's the news for the American people. He's complaining about the lying and stealing. The lying and stealing has already occurred. The trust fund is filled with IOUs. We can't fix the problem just by entering Congress's retirement. That's worth about this much. We need to go at the fundamental problem. And the fundamental problem is that this system is broken. It has been stolen from. We have been lied to. We need a strong leader to tell the truth and fix it.
All right, this is it. 30 seconds finally.
Well, you ask about how we fund it. One of the reasons that Social Security is in so much trouble is the only funding stream comes from people who get a wage. The people who get wages is declining dramatically. Most of the income in this country is made by people at the top who get dividends and capital gains. The fair tax transforms the process by which we fund Social Security and Medicare, because the money paid at consumption is paid by everybody, including illegals, prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, all the people that are freeloading off the system now. That's why it ought to be a transformed system.
All right, enough. Mr. Trump.
Getting a little R-rated.
Mr. Trump, you talk a lot about how you are the person on this stage to grow the economy. I want to ask you about your business record. Trump corporations, casinos and hotels, have declared bankruptcy 4 times over the last quarter century. In 2011, you told Forbes magazine this: "I've used the laws of the country to my advantage." But at the same time, financial experts involved in those bankruptcies say that lenders to your companies lost billions of dollars. Question, sir, with that record, why should we trust you to run the nation's business?
Because I have used the laws of this country, just like the greatest people that you read about every day in business have used the laws of this country, the chapter laws, to do a great job for my company, for myself, for my employees, for my family, etc. I have never gone bankrupt, by the way. I have never. But out of hundreds of deals,
but sir,
excuse me,
that's your line, but your companies have gone bankrupt.
What am I saying? Out of hundreds of deals that I've done, hundreds, on 4 occasions, I've taken advantage of the laws of this country, like other people. I'm not going to name their names because I'm not going to embarrass, but virtually every person that you read about on the front page of the business sections, they've used the law. The difference is when somebody else uses those laws, nobody writes about it. When I use it, they say, oh, Trump, Trump, Trump. The fact is, I built a net worth of more than $10 billion. I have a great, great company. I employ thousands of people, and I'm very proud of the job I did. Again, Chris, hundreds and hundreds of deals. 4 times I've taken advantage of the laws, and frankly, so has everybody else in my position.
Well, sir, let's just talk about the latest example, which is Trump Entertainment Resorts, which went bankrupt in 2009. In that case alone, lenders to your company lost over $1 billion, and more than 1,100 people were laid off.
Well,
is that the way that you run the country?
Let me just tell you about the lenders. First of all, these lenders aren't babies. These are total killers. These are not the nice, sweet little people that you think, okay? You know, I mean, you're living in a world of the make-believe, Chris. You want to know the truth. And I had the good sense to leave Atlantic City, which, by the way, Caesars just went bankrupt. Every company, Chris can tell you, every company virtually in Atlantic City went bankrupt. Every company. And let me just tell you, I had the good sense, and I've gotten a lot of credit in the financial pages. 7 years ago, I left Atlantic City before it totally cratered, and I made a lot of money in Atlantic City, and I'm very proud of it. I want to tell you that. Very, very proud of it. And by the way, this country right now owes $19 trillion, and they need somebody like me to straighten out that mess.
Senator Rubio. Senator Rubio, more than 3,000 people sent us questions about the economy and jobs on Facebook. And here is a video question from Tanya Sialko from Philadelphia. Here she is.
Please describe one action you would do to make the economic environment more favorable for small businesses and entrepreneurs and anyone dreaming of opening their own business.
That's a great question.
Senator, how do you answer Tanya?
That's a great question. First of all, it begins by having leaders that recognize that the economy we live in today is dramatically different from the one we had 5 years ago. It's an economy that now has placed us in global competition with dozens of other countries around the world. Now, the big companies that have connections with Washington, they can affect policies to help them, but the small companies like the one Tanya's talking about, they're the ones that are struggling. The first thing we need to do is we need to even out the tax code for small businesses so that we lower their tax rate to 25%, just as we need to lower it for all businesses. We need to have a regulatory budget in America that limits the amount of regulations on our economy. We need to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we need to improve higher education so that people can have access to the skills they need for 21st century jobs. And last but not least, we need to repeal Dodd-Frank. It is eviscerating small businesses and small banks. Over 40% of small and mid-sized banks that loan money to small businesses have been wiped out since Dodd-Frank has passed. We need to repeal and replace Dodd-Frank. We need to make America fair again for all businesses, but especially those being run by small business owners.
Senator Rubio, thank you.
Gentlemen, another question for a few of you. Just yesterday, President Obama criticized Republican lawmakers trying to block the Iran deal, calling them knee-jerk partisans, adding that hardliners in Iran who chant death to America were, quote, making common cause with the Republican caucus. Here's what two of your opponents on the 5 p.m. debate stage said about Iran.
I will tell you one thing. I would a whole lot rather had Carly Fiorina over there doing our negotiation than John Kerry. Maybe we would have gotten a deal where we didn't give everything away. But the issue for us is to have a Congress that stands up and says not only no, but hell no to this money going to a regime that is going to use it for terror.
When America does not lead, the world is a dangerous and a tragic place. This is a bad deal. Obama broke every rule of negotiation. Yes, our allies are not perfect, but Iran is at the heart of most of the evil that is going on in the Middle East through their proxy.
Now, I want to ask a few of you this. First, Governor Walker, you've said that you would tear up the Iran deal on day one. If this deal is undone, what then?
Well, first off, let's remember, I still remember as a kid tying a yellow ribbon around the tree in front of my house during the 444 days that Iran held 52 Americans hostage. Iran is not a place we should be doing business with. To me, you terminate the deal on day one. You reinstate the sanctions authorized by Congress. You go to Congress and put in place even more crippling sanctions in place, and then you convince our allies to do the same. This is not just bad with Iran. This is bad with ISIS. It is tied together, and once and for all, we need a leader who's going to stand up and do something about it. It's yet another example of the failed foreign policy of the Obama-Clinton doctrine.
Senator Paul, would you tear up the deal on day one?
I oppose the Iranian deal and will vote against it. I don't think that the president negotiated from a position of strength, but I don't immediately discount negotiations. I'm a Reagan conservative. Reagan did negotiate with the Soviets, but you have to negotiate from a position of strength, and I think President Obama gave away too much too early. If there's going to be a negotiation, you're going to have to believe somehow that the Iranians are going to comply. And I asked this question to John Kerry. I said, do you believe they're trustworthy? And he said, no. And I said, well, how are we going to get them to comply? I would have never released the sanctions before there was consistent evidence of compliance.
Governor Huckabee, what do you think about what Senator Paul just said?
Ronald Reagan said trust but verify. President Obama is trust but vilify. He trusts our enemies and vilifies everyone who disagrees with him. And the reason we disagree with him has nothing to do with party. It has to do with the incredibly dangerous place that this world is going to be as a result of a deal in which we got nothing. We didn't even get 4 hostages out. We got nothing. And Iran gets everything they want. We said we would have anywhere, anytime negotiations and inspections. We gave that up. We said that we would make sure that they didn't have any nuclear capacity, we gave that up. The president can't tell us what we got. I'll tell you what the world got. The world has a burgeoning nuclear power that didn't, as the Soviets, say we might defend ourselves in a war. What the Iranians have said is, we will wipe Israel off the face of the map, and we will bring death to America. When someone points a gun at your head and loads it, by God, you ought to take them seriously, and we need to take that seriously.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, the first debate night of the 2016 presidential campaign continues from Cleveland after a short timeout. Stick around. Social issues. Welcome back, gentlemen. We're going to move on now to discuss some social issues across the board. Governor Bush, I'll start with you. Many Republicans have been outraged recently by a series of videos on Planned Parenthood. You now say that you support ending federal funding for this organization. However, until late 2014, right before you started your campaign, you sat on the board of a Bloomberg charity that quite publicly gave tens of millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood while you were a director. How could you not know about these well-publicized donations? And if you did know, how could you help a charity so openly committed to abortion rights?
I joined the Bloomberg Foundation because of Mike Bloomberg's shared commitment for meaningful education reform. That's why I was on it. We never had a debate about the budget. It was presented and we approved it, not item by item. Here's my record. As governor of the state of Florida, I defunded Planned Parenthood. I created a culture of life in our state. We were the only state to appropriate money for crisis pregnancy centers. We expanded dramatically the number of adoptions out of our foster care system. We did parental notification laws. We ended partial birth abortion. We did all of this, and we were the first state to do a Choose Life license plate. Now 29 states have done it, and tens of millions of dollars have gone to create a culture where more people, more babies are adopted.
But did you know?
No, I didn't know, but it doesn't matter. I was working on this board because of the education. My record is clear. My record as a pro-life governor is not in dispute. I am completely pro-life, and I believe that we should have a culture of life. It's informed by my faith from beginning to end. And I did this not just as it related to unborn babies, I did it at the end-of-life issues as well. This is something that goes way beyond politics, and I hope one day that we get to the point where we respect life in its fullest form across the board.
Senator Rubio, you favor a rape and incest exception to abortion bans. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York just said yesterday those exceptions are preposterous. He said they discriminate against an entire class of human beings. If you believe that life begins at conception, as you say you do, how do you justify ending a life just because it begins violently through no fault of the baby?
Well, Megan, first of all, I'm not sure that that's a correct assessment of my record. I would go on to add that I believe all
You don't favor a rape and an incest exception?
I have never said that, and I have never advocated that. What I have advocated is that we pass a law in this country that says all human life at every stage of its development is worthy of protection. In fact, I think that law already exists. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And let me go further. I believe that every single human being is entitled to the protection of our laws, whether they can vote or not, whether they can speak or not, whether they can hire a lawyer or not, whether they have a birth certificate or not. And I think future generations will look back at this history of our country and call us barbarians for murdering millions of babies who we never gave them a chance to live.
Mr. Trump, in 1999, you said you were, quote, very pro-choice, even supporting partial birth abortion. You favored an assault weapons ban as well. In 2004, you said in most cases you identified as a Democrat. Even in this campaign, your critics say you often sound more like a Democrat than a Republican, calling several of your opponents on this stage things like clowns and puppets. When did you actually become a Republican?
I don't think they like me very much. I'll tell you what, I've evolved on many issues over the years, and you know who else has is Ronald Reagan evolved on many issues. And I am pro-life, and if you look at the question, I was in business, they asked me a question as to pro-life or choice, and I said, if you let it run, that I hate the concept of abortion. I hate the concept of abortion. And then since then, I've very much evolved. And what happened is friends of mine years ago were going to have a child and it was going to be aborted, and it wasn't aborted, and that child today is a total superstar, a great, great child. And I saw that, and I saw other instances, and I am very, very proud to say that I am pro-life. As far as being a Republican is concerned, I come from a place, New York City, which is virtually, I mean, it's almost exclusively Democrat. And I have really started to see some of the negatives. As an example, and I have a lot of liking for this man, but the last number of months of his brother's administration were a catastrophe. And unfortunately, those few months gave us President Obama, and you can't be happy about that.
Governor Bush, I want to ask you, on the subject of name-calling of your fellow candidates, a story appeared today quoting an anonymous GOP donor who said you called Mr. Trump a clown, a buffoon, something else that cannot be repeated on television.
None of which is true.
Is it true?
No, it's not true. But I have said that Mr. Trump's language is divisive. I want to win. I want one of these people here, or the ones at 5 o'clock, to be the next president of the United States. We're not going to win by doing what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton do each and every day, dividing the country, creating a grievance kind of environment. We're going to win when we unite people with a hopeful, optimistic message. I have that message because I was a governor of a state that saw people lifted up because we had high sustained economic growth. Our economy grew at double the rate of the nation. We created 1.3 million jobs. We led the nation 7 out of those 8 years. We were only one of 2 states that went to AAA bond rating. I cut taxes $19 billion. If you do that and apply conservative principles the right way, you create an environment where everybody rises up. That's how we're going to win. Campaigning in places to give people hope that their life is better, because too many people are suffering today in America.
Mr. Trump, 30 seconds.
Well, first of all, Jeb, I am very happy that you denied that, and I appreciate that very much. I mean, he's a true gentleman. He really is. The one thing he did say about, and I mean that, the one thing he did say about me, however, was my tone, and I also understand that. But when you have people that are cutting Christians' heads off, when you have a world at the border and at so many places that it's medieval times, it's almost got to be as bad as it ever was in terms of the violence and the horror. We don't have time for tone. We have to go out and get the job done.
Subject of gay marriage and religious liberty. Governor Kasich, if you had a son or daughter who was gay or lesbian, how would you explain to them your opposition to same-sex marriage?
Well, look, I'm an old-fashioned person here, and I happen to believe in traditional marriage. But I've also said the court has ruled.
But how would you explain to your child?
Megan, the court has ruled, and I said we'll accept it. And guess what? I just went to a wedding of a friend of mine who happens to be gay. Because somebody doesn't think the way I do, doesn't mean that I can't care about them or I can't love them. So if one of my daughters happened to be that, of course I would love them and I would accept them, because you know what? That's what we're taught when we have strong faith. So issues like that are planted to divide us. I think the simple fact of the matter is, and this is where I would agree with Jeb, and I've been saying it all along, we need to give everybody a chance, treat everybody with respect, and let them share in this great American dream that we have, Megan. So, look, I'm going to love my daughters. I'm going to love them no matter what they do, because you know what? God gives me unconditional love. I'm going to give it to my family and my friends and the people around me.
Senator Paul, in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling on same-sex marriage, Carol Fox on Facebook wants to know the following. Quote, what will you do to ensure Christians are not prosecuted for speaking out against gay marriage? And will Christians be forced to conduct business that conflicts with their religious beliefs?
Look, I don't want my marriage or my guns registered in Washington. And if people have an opinion that's a religious opinion that is heartily felt, obviously they should be allowed to practice that, and no government should interfere with them. One of the things that really got to me was the thing in Houston where you had the government, the mayor, actually trying to get the sermons of ministers. When the government tries to invade the church to enforce its own opinion on marriage, that's when it's time to resist.
Governor Walker. Many in the Black Lives Matter movement and beyond believe that overly aggressive police officers targeting young African Americans is the civil rights issue of our time. Do you agree? And if so, how do you plan to address it? If not, why not?
Well, I think the most important thing we can do when it comes to policing is something you've had a guest on who's a friend of mine, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, who's talked to me many times about this in the past. It's about training. It's about making sure that law enforcement professionals, not only on the way in to their positions, but all the way through their time, have the proper training, particularly when it comes to use of force, and that we protect and stand up and support those men and women who are doing their jobs in law enforcement. And for the very few that don't, that there are consequences to show that we treat everyone the same here in America.
Thank you.
Coming up, more of our debate, including questions about President Obama's foreign policy and these guys and their better ideas. Coming up.
Foreign policy. Candidates, you may not have seen the late developing news today. Our Fox Pentagon team broke earlier this evening about a top Iranian general traveling to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. His name is General Qasem Soleimani. He's blamed for hundreds of U.S. troops' deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. His trip to Russia appears to directly violate UN Security Council resolutions to confine him to Iran. So, Mr. Trump, if you were president, how would you respond to this?
I would be so different from what you have right now, like the polar opposite. We have a president who doesn't have a clue. I would say he's incompetent, but I don't want to do that because that's not nice. But if you look at the deals we make, whether it's the nuclear deal with 24-hour periods, and by the way, before you get to the 24 hours, you have to go through a system. You look at Sergeant Bergdahl. We get Bergdahl, a traitor, and they get 5 of the big, great killers, leaders that they want. We have people in Washington that don't know what they're doing. Now, I agree. Now, with Iran, we're making a deal. You would say, we want him. We want him. We want our prisoners. We want all these things. We don't get anything. We're giving them $150 billion plus. They are going to be, I'll tell you what, if Iran was a stock, you folks should go out and buy it right now because you'll quadruple. What's happened in Iran is a disgrace, and it's going to lead to destruction in large portions of the world.
Another new development today. Senior defense officials tell Fox they strongly suspect Russia was behind a cyber attack on the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Office, emails. This comes in the wake of the Director of National Intelligence blaming the Chinese for the largest ever cyber attack, stealing personal data of tens of millions of Americans. Senator Cruz, in your view, have Russia and China committed acts of cyber war? And if you were president, what would you do about it?
Well, Brett, of course they have. And over the last 6.5 years, we've seen the consequences of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. Leading from behind is a disaster. We have abandoned and alienated our friends and allies, and our enemies are stronger. Radical Islam is on the rise. Iran's on the verge of acquiring a nuclear weapon. China is waging cyber warfare against America. Russia, General Soleimani, you just mentioned, the Iranian general, is the head of the Al-Quds forces. He's directly responsible for the murder of over 500 American servicemen in Iraq, and part of this Iranian deal was lifting the international sanctions on General Soleimani. The day General Soleimani flew back from Moscow to Iran was the day we believe that Russia used cyber warfare against the Joint Chiefs. We need a new commander-in-chief that will stand up to our enemies and that will have credibility. It is worth emphasizing that Iran released our hostages in 1981, the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
Dr. Carson, in August of 2012, President Obama famously declared that if Syrian President Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons, quote, that's a red line for us, and that there would be enormous consequences. 1 year later, with overwhelming evidence that Assad had in fact used chemical weapons and crossed that red line, President Obama declined to use military force against the Assad regime. As president, would you have used military force there?
Well, what we have to stop and think about is the fact that we have weakened ourselves militarily to such an extent that it affects all of our military policies. Our Navy is at its smallest size since 1917. Our Air Force since 1940. In recent testimony, the Commandant of the Marine Corps said half of the non-deployed units were not ready. And the sequester is cutting the heart out of our personnel. Our generals are retiring because they don't want to be part of this. And at the same time, our enemies are increasing. Our friends can't trust us anymore. You know, Ukraine was a nuclear-armed state. They gave away their nuclear arms with the understanding that we would protect them. We won't even give them offensive weapons. You know, we turned our back on Israel, our ally. You know, and in a situation like that, of course, Obama's not going to be able to do anything. I would shore up our military first, because if you don't get the military right, nothing else is going to work.
Governor Walker, as president, what would you do if Russian President Vladimir Putin started a campaign to destabilize NATO allies Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, mirroring the actions Putin took at the early days of Ukraine?
Well, first off, for the cyber attack with Russia the other day, it's sad to think right now, but probably the Russian and Chinese government know more about Hillary Clinton's email server than do the members of the United States Congress. And that has put our national security at risk. If I'm president, he won't think about that. You know, Putin believes in the old Lenin adage that you probe with bayonets. When you find mush, you push. When you find steel, you stop. Under Obama and Clinton, we found a lot of mush over the last few years. We need to have a national security that puts steel in front of our enemies. I would send weapons to Ukraine. I would work with NATO to put forces on the eastern border of Poland and the Baltic nations. And I would reinstate and put in place back in the missile defense system that we had in Poland and in the Czech Republic.
Governor
Huckabee, find steel.
Governor Huckabee, the culture of the American military is definitely changing. Women are moving into combat roles. Don't ask, don't tell has obviously been dropped. And now Defense Secretary Ashton Carter recently directed the military to prepare for a moment when it is welcoming transgender persons to serve openly. As Commander-in-Chief, how would you handle that?
The military is not a social experiment. The purpose of the military is kill people and break things. It's not to transform the culture by trying out some ideas that some people think would make us a different country and more diverse. The purpose is to protect America. I'm not sure how paying for transgender surgery for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines makes our country safer. We've reduced the military by 25% under President Obama. The disaster is that we've forgotten why we have a military. The purpose of it is to make sure that we protect every American wherever that American is. And if an American is calling out for help, whether it's in Benghazi or at the border, then we ought to be able to answer it. We've not done that because we've decimated our military. We're flying B-52s. The most recent one that was put in service was November of 1962. A lot of the B-52s we're flying, we've only got 44 that are in service, combat ready. And the fact is, most of them are older than me. And that's pretty scary.
Senator Paul, the first budget you proposed as senator cut all financial aid to Israel. You have since changed your view on that issue. What made you change your mind?
Well, let's be clear. I'm the only one on the stage who actually has a 5-year budget that balances. I've put pencil to paper, and I've said I would cut spending, and I've said exactly where. Each one of my budgets has taken a meat axe to foreign aid because I think we ought to quit sending it to countries that hate us. I think we ought to quit sending it to countries that burn our flag. Israel's not one of those. But even Benjamin Netanyahu said that ultimately they will be stronger when they're independent. My position is exactly the same. We shouldn't borrow money from China to send it anywhere, but why don't we start with eliminating aid to our enemies?
Okay, but you still say that Israel could be one of the countries that is cut from financial aid.
I still say exactly what my original opinion is. Do you borrow money from China to send it to anyone? Out of your surplus, you can help your allies, and Israel is a great ally, and this is no particular animus of Israel. But what I will say, and I will say over and over again, we cannot give away money we don't have. We do not project power from bankruptcy court. We're borrowing $1 million a minute. It's got to stop somewhere.
Governor Christie, what do you think of that answer?
Well, listen, you know, if we want to deal with these issues, we have to deal with them in a way that makes sense. I agree with what Dr. Carson said earlier. The first thing we need to do to make America stronger is to strengthen our military. And I put out a really specific plan. No less than 500,000 active duty soldiers in the Army. No less than 185,000 active duty Marines in the Marine Corps. Bring us to a 350-ship Navy again and modernize the Ohio-class of submarines and bring our Air Force back to 2,600 aircraft that are ready to go. Those are the kind of things that are going to send a clear message around the world. Those are the things that we need to start working on immediately to make our country stronger and make it better. Those are the things that we need to be able to be doing. And as we move towards dealing with foreign aid, I don't disagree with Senator Paul's position that we shouldn't be funding our enemies, but I absolutely believe that Israel is a priority to be able to fund and keep them strong and safe after 8 years of this administration.
Governor, thank you.
Brett, can I jump in on this one?
Senator, we're going to finish up with some more questions. Thank you.
We have to stand you by because after the break, we're going to let the candidates make their closing statements, their final thoughts, and God. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. In our final moments here together, we're going to allow the candidates to offer their final thoughts. But first, we want to ask them an interesting closing question from Chase Norton on Facebook, who wants to know this of the candidates. I want to know if any of them have received a word from God on what they should do and take care of first. Senator Cruz, start from you. Any word from God?
Well, I am blessed to receive a word from God every day and receiving the Scriptures and reading the Scriptures, and God speaks through the Bible. I'm the son of a pastor and an evangelist, and I've described many times how my father, when I was a child, was an alcoholic. He wasn't a Christian, and my father left my mother and left me when I was just 3 years old, and someone invited him to Clay Road Baptist Church, and he gave his heart to Jesus, and it turned him around, and he got on a plane, and he flew back to my mother and me. I would also note that the Scripture tells us, you shall know them by their fruits. We see lots of campaign conservatives. But if we're going to win in 2016, we need a consistent conservative, someone who's been a fiscal conservative, a social conservative, a national security conservative. There are real differences among the candidates on issues like amnesty, like Obamacare, like religious liberty, like life and marriage. And I have been proud to fight and stand for religious liberty, to stand against Planned Parenthood, to defend life for my entire career. And I will be proud to continue to do so as President of the United States.
Governor Kasich, same question.
Well, Megan, my father was a mailman. His father was a coal miner. My mother's mother could barely speak English, and their son today stands on this podium in the great state of Ohio, not only as the governor, but a candidate for President of the United States. I do believe in miracles. You know, I've had a lot of elections, but my elections are really not about campaigns. I tell my people that these are about a movement. And a movement to do what? To restore common sense, a movement to do things like provide economic growth, and a movement not to let anybody be behind. You know, today the country's divided. You asked a question about the police and the difficulty in communities. We've got to unite our country again, because we're stronger when we are united, and we are weaker when we are divided. And we've got to listen to other people's voices, respect them, but keep in mind, and I believe in terms of the things that I've read in my lifetime, the Lord's not picking us, but because of how we respect human rights, because that we are a good force in the world, He wants America to be strong, He wants America to succeed, and He wants America to lead. And nothing's more important to me than my family, my faith, and my friends.
Governor Walker, same question.
Well, thanks, Megan. I'm certainly an imperfect man, and it's only by the blood of Jesus Christ that I've been redeemed from my sins. So I know that God doesn't call me to do a specific thing. God hasn't given me a list, a 10 commandments, if you will, of things to act on the first day. What God calls us to do is follow his will. And ultimately, that's what I'm going to try and do. And I hope people have seen in my state, even in the big challenges I took on when I had over 100,000 protesters in and around our capital trying to do what I thought was the right thing, it wasn't just how I took on those political battles. It was ultimately how I acted, not responding in kind, not lashing out, but just being decent going forward and living my life in a way that would be a testimony to him and his faith, and our faith.
Senator Rubio, I want to ask you the same question, but I do want to mention a woman just came here to the stage and asked, what about the veterans? I want to hear more about what these candidates are going to do for our nation's veterans. So I put the question to you about God and the veterans, which you may find to be related.
Well, first let me say I think God has blessed us. He's blessed the Republican Party with some very good candidates. The Democrats can't even find one. And I believe God has blessed our country. This country's been extraordinarily blessed, and we have honored that blessing, and that's why God has continued to bless us. And he's blessed us with young men and women willing to risk their lives and sometimes die in uniform for the safety and security of our people. Unfortunately, today we have a VA that does not do enough for them. I am proud that last year we helped change the law. We changed the law to give the power to the VA secretary, the ability to fire any executive that isn't doing their job. And it is outrageous. They've only fired one person to date. When I'm president of the United States, we're going to have a VA that cares more about our veterans than about the bureaucrats who work at the VA.
Dr. Carson, question to you about God and his role, but also one of the issues that the public was very interested in, and we touched on it earlier, is race relations in this country and how divided we seem right now. And what, if anything, you would do as the next president to help heal that divide?
Well, I think the bully pulpit is a wonderful place to start healing that divide. You know, we have the purveyors of hatred who take every single incident between people of two races and try to make a race war out of it and drive wedges into people. And this does not need to be done. What we need to think about instead, you know, I was asked by an NPR reporter once, why don't I talk about race that often? I said, it's because I'm a neurosurgeon. And she thought that was a strange response. And I said, you see, when I take someone to the operating room, I'm actually operating on the thing that makes them who they are. The skin doesn't make them who they are. The hair doesn't make them who they are. And it's time for us to move beyond that, because, you know, our strength as a nation comes in our unity. We are the United States of America, not the divided states. And those who want to destroy us are trying to divide us, and we shouldn't let them do it.
Thank you.
Now, each candidate will make a closing statement. You'll all have 30 seconds to make a closing statement for this debate. We'll start with Ohio Governor John Kasich.
You know, tonight we hear about what people want to do. I want to tell you what I've done. I was a member of the Armed Services Committee for 18 years. I spent a big chunk of my life studying national security issues and our role in the world. Number two, I was the chairman of the House Budget Committee and one of the chief architects the last time we balanced the budget, and it was the first time we'd done it since man walked on the moon. We had a $5 trillion surplus and we cut taxes. I spent 10 years in the private sector actually learning how business works, and now I'm the governor of Ohio, and I inherited a state that was on the brink of dying. And we've turned it all around with jobs and balanced budgets and rising credit and tax cuts, and the state is unified and people have hope again in Ohio.
Well, thank you, Megan. Listen, I was born into a middle-class family in New Jersey. My dad came home from serving in the Army after having lost his father, worked in the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark, New Jersey, and was the first person to graduate from college, put himself through college at night. My mom was his secretary. I was appointed United States Attorney on September 10th, 2001, and spent the next 7 years of my career fighting terrorism and putting terrorists in jail. I'm a conservative, pro-life governor in a state where it's really tough to be both. In a state like New Jersey with lots of Democrats, but still we cut taxes, we balanced budgets, we fought the teachers union, This president has had weak leadership, which has led to bad choices. We got to stop worrying about being loved and start worrying about being respected, and that's exactly how I'll lead our country.
Senator Paul, closing statement.
I'm a different kind of Republican. I've introduced a 5-year balanced budget. I've introduced the largest tax cut in our history. I stood for 10.5 hours on the Senate floor to defend your right to be left alone. But I've also gone to Chicago, I've gone to Detroit, I've been to Ferguson, I've been to Baltimore, because I want our party to be bigger, better, and bolder, and I'm the only one that leads Hillary Clinton in 5 states that were won by President Obama. I'm a different kind of Republican.
Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you. You know, both of my parents were born into poor families on the island of Cuba. They came to America because it was the only place where people like them could have a chance. Here in this country, they never made it big, but the very purpose of their life was to give us the chance to do all the things they never could. My father was a bartender, and the journey from the back of that bar to this stage tonight, to me, that's the essence of the American dream. It's what makes our nation different, and I'm running for president because I want that to still be possible for the people trying to do that now. I run for president because I believe that we can't just save the American dream, we can expand it to reach more people and change more lives than ever before, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. So we can make America greater than it's ever been and make of this century a new American century.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Ted Cruz.
If I am elected president, let me tell you about my first day in office. The first thing I intend to do is to rescind every illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken by Barack Obama. The next thing I intend to do is instruct the Department of Justice to open an investigation into these videos and to prosecute Planned Parenthood for any criminal violations. The next thing I intend to do is instruct the Department of Justice and the IRS to start persecuting religious liberty. I then intend to cancel the Iran deal and finally move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. I will keep my word. My father fled Cuba, and I will fight to defend liberty because my family knows what it's like to lose it.
Dr. Carson, closing statement.
Well, I haven't said anything about me being the only one to do anything, so let me try that. I'm the only one to separate Siamese twins. The only one to operate on babies while they were still in the mother's womb. The only one to take out half of a brain, although you would think if you go to Washington that someone had beat me to it. But I'm very hopeful that I'm not the only one who's willing to pick up the baton of freedom, because freedom is not free and we must fight for it every day. Every one of us must fight for it because we're fighting for our children and the next generation.
Governor Mike Huckabee, closing statement.
It seems like this election has been a whole lot about a person who's very high in the polls but doesn't have a clue about how to govern, a person who has been filled with scandals and who could not lead. And of course, I'm talking about Hillary Clinton. I think America is in trouble, but it's not beyond repair. But it's going to take leadership who sees the greatness of this country and who believes that once again we can be one nation under God. I'll be my best to do that, and thank you for your support.
Governor Scott Walker.
Thanks. I'm a guy with a wife and 2 kids and a Harley. One article called me aggressively normal. I ran for governor because I was worried about my kids' future. Then I took on the big government union bosses, and we won. They tried to recall me, and we won. They targeted us again, and we won. We balanced the budget, cut taxes, and turned our state around with big, bold reforms. It wasn't too late for Wisconsin, and it's not too late for America. That's why I asked for your vote.
Governor Bush, closing statement, sir.
Here's what I believe. I believe we're at the verge of the greatest time to be alive in this world. but Washington is holding us back. How we tax, how we regulate. We're not embracing the energy revolution in our midst, a broken immigration system that has been politicized rather than turning it into an economic driver. We're not protecting and preserving our entitlement system or reforming for the next generation. All these things languish while we have politicians in Washington using these as wedge issues. Here's my commitment to you, because I did it as Florida. We can fix these things. We can grow economically and restore America's leadership in the world so that everybody has a chance to rise up. I humbly ask for your vote whenever you're going to get to vote, whenever the primary is. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Trump, closing statement, sir.
Our country is in serious trouble. We don't win anymore. We don't beat China in trade. We don't beat Japan with their millions and millions of cars coming into this country in trade. We can't beat Mexico at the border or in trade. We can't do anything right. Our military has to be strengthened. Our vets have to be taken care of. We have to end Obamacare, and we have to make our country great again, and I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you.
It's over.
That's it.
You relieved? You were nervous before? They don't look relieved. They like, get me out of here. Thank you all very much. And that will do it for the first Republican primary debate night of the 2016 presidential race. Our thanks to the candidates, who will now be joined by their families on stage. But we're not done. The Kelly File starts in a moment. I'll be running over to the other set. But first, Brett, Chris, they're here with me. We're going to say hello to the candidates. But
All right, Dr. Carson.
How you doing?
Nice to see you.
We're going to have a little chit-chat today. Great to see you, Doc. Kind of ruining it for us.
No, it's the moment. You know, it's the moment. Their families have been sitting here in this arena on pins and needles.
Way more nervous than these guys.
Way more nervous. You know, waiting for every answer, waiting for everything, and now, you know, they get up, they get their hugs, they get their kisses.
It's got to be a big relief. I mean, they're only human, right? Just to get this over with.
Can I also say that at the risk of sounding Pollyanna-ish, I actually think all 10 candidates did quite well.
Look at Senator Cruz.
Oh, look at this. Look at Senator Cruz. but I think they all handled themselves well. I thought they all made their points. You know,
they all had moments, Chris. They
Absolutely.
all had some moment on some issue, and they really ran the gamut as far as the different issues. We've been working